this Alteryx Weekly Challenge is a great one for practicing apps, and I don't get much practice with that myself, so I found this challenge really useful. So we start off by knowing that we have to have a date interface in our app interface. So we go up to the interface shelf at the top here and find the date one. And the way that that works is we're going to connect it to a text input tool where we've just got any kind of placeholder date here, my birthday, and we're just going to use update cell, which is the default one here, in the action. So if you're not familiar, then when you bring an interface tool on and you've got your text input that you want to connect them together with, you can just drag that to the little lightning bolt and it automatically brings in the action tool. And that gives us our default, which is what we want to stick with. So that's lovely. Now, whenever we change the date in our interface, if I just bring that up, it goes onto my second screen always, which is really annoying. But yeah, you've got your date selector here now, so we can do anything. We can change the date, and that will update this cell here. So that's wonderful. So now we want to bring in our other thing, our other selector, which is the units that we want to be outputting. So we've got all of these just written in as a text input here, and we're just going to append those to our dates so that we get for each unit we have the date on that row as well, so that when we do our date diff calculation, then it will we don't have to write 5 separate date diffs. We can just write one date diff calculation and it will do it for all the different units. So we've got date time diff, we've got today as a function, date time today, and then we've got our date that the user inputs and the units of how to calculate that. And we can see that's working nicely apart from for the weeks. So I didn't realize that you can't use weeks in the date diff formula, but that's not a problem because we're just going to transpose this out so that we have a column for each of our units, and we're going to use the days divided by 7 and round that to the wholest number to get our weeks number. So if we do that, we cross-tab it. So we have our units as our new headers, our date diff values in as the values there. We can see the order's got a bit messed up, which is frustrating, but we can use select tools to get around that. So first of all, we're just doing that calculation I was saying about the weeks to get our value here. So we're rounding it to 0 decimal places, basically, to a whole number. And we're just dividing the days by 7, because that's how you get to weeks, right? So we reorder those fields as we said we were going to do there, so that they're all nicely in the years to hours order, so that that shows up nicely in our interface for the user. And to get the list box that we want to see here, then we're using the list box tool. So what that means is that I always forget how to use this basically. So we're showing in our list of what we want to appear there. So what fields do we want to be in that list? So it has to be as field headers the values that you want to appear in that list, which is something that I always forget, and I always end up trying to put it in as rows and getting confused as to why it's not working. But anyway, so we're having it all checked by default as well. We're in select tool mode because we're going to connect it to a select tool so that we can only have those columns flowing out of the app that we want to. So we need to update this action tool to be select with a multi-select list box, which it kind of tells you clues in the name that it's updating the select. That's why we're connecting it to a select tool. But it's just, we need to change it from the default is basically why I'm mentioning it there. And then, yeah, that would just make sure that it ticks or unticks the relevant fields here before we just output it anywhere, basically. So if I test this out, let's test it out on last Monday to now. We'll deselect days, for example, to see if that works. Yep, it finished running, and we look at the output, and we see that we've got, yep, there's been no years, no months since last Monday, but there has been a week, and that has constituted of 216 hours. So that's all working as we'd expect it to. Some of the ways that I slipped up whilst I was making this, I had this select tool right at the beginning, so then when I deselected days, it naturally wouldn't be able to calculate the weeks later on. So it's better to have it later as the last thing we do to exclude those columns. And I hope that was nice and straightforward as to how you can go about building your first app. So thanks for listening.